Hey, what's going on, guys? And welcome back to another episode of Three Things. Today we're going to talk about the OnePlus 7 Pro in 2020 and whether or not you should consider buying it. I'm going to give you the three things I like about this phone and the three things I do not like about this phone. Let's get to it. The first thing I love about this phone is the speed. This is one of the fastest, most fluid phones you will ever use. Honestly, it's up there with any flagship that's out in 2020. It's fast. And I mean, everything's fast about this phone. The 90 hertz refresh rate, the actual speed of the operating system is insane on this phone. You're not going to find a much better user experience with minimal bloatware as far as speed goes. This is still one of the fastest devices I have ever used. So there is no doubt that you're not going to have any problems with any hiccups or playing any games or anything you need to do on this phone. It can do, and it can do it well and fast. So if you're worried about speed or you're worried about, oh, it's last year's or any of that kind of stuff, last year's processor, don't worry. This phone will not disappoint you in the speed department. The second thing I love about this phone, and honestly, it has a lot to do with the first thing I love about this phone, which is the speed, is this screen. This screen is edge to edge. There is no hole punch. There is no notch. There is no anything. This is a full immersive experience when you're watching content or you're playing games or any of that kind of stuff. It's wonderful to have. I don't know why more companies don't use a pop-up camera. Pop-up camera is definitely a good way to go if you want that full screen experience. I mean, there's nothing blocking your way on this screen at all. It's a beautiful OLED display. It's really nice to be able to watch content without having a notch or a hole punch or anything changing the experience for you. And there's a lot to be said for phones that can do this. I think more pop-up cameras should be used in the future until we can get that under display camera that's not going to affect your display at all. But until then, this is definitely one of the best ways to incorporate a full screen into a phone and really have an immersive experience. This display is by far one of the best displays out there right now. You're not going to feel like you got shorted because you have last year's phone or any of that. Actually, you'll feel like you're ahead of everybody else because there's no hole punch and no notch. And that brings me to the third thing that I love about this phone. And I'm going to catch a little heat for this, I'm sure, but I like the cameras. The cameras work just fine. I know they did not work so great when the phone first came out. There's been a lot of improvements in the camera department on this phone. And as far as a point and shoot and just take a picture, this does a solid job. It's not something that I think an average person would have a problem with. I know we're kind of like tech people and we're into this kind of stuff and, everything's every little pixel and worrying about things. But as far as point and shoot at this point, it does a pretty good job. If it doesn't, there's Gcam. And I understand most average people aren't going to install Gcam on their phone. But if you do, then the experience is even better. This particular phone takes fine pictures. Point and shoot pictures are just fine. I haven't had any major issues with the camera. Listen, is it the best camera on the market? Absolutely not. But is it solid enough to get you through with no issues or no problems? Is it a good enough camera to take pictures every day and take pictures of your kids and your pets and everything else? It's perfectly fine. There's no major issues with the camera where I would say, oh my God, don't use this because it's going to take terrible pictures. Everybody's going to look like Minecraft. That's not the case with this phone. The pictures are just fine. They come out just fine. It's not a Pixel or an iPhone, but not many phones even get close to those levels of photography in the first place. This is solid. This is a very solid device as far as the cameras go for the price. And I know a lot of people had a lot of bad things to say about the cameras, but for me, I haven't had any major issues. I think it takes just fine pictures. It's not a mirrorless camera, no, but it does take perfectly fine pictures. Okay, so now let's get into the things that I don't like so much about this phone. Starting with the first thing I don't like about this phone. It does not have wireless charging. Now, I know not everybody's into wireless charging, I get that, but a lot of people now have been basically pushed toward that, especially with the iPhone having it and everything else. So most of the time, people have wireless charging pads around their house. For me, that's definite. I have wireless charging pads all over the house. It's weird not to be able to just drop my phone on it and be done with it. I have to plug it in somewhere. it's kind of an issue. It's something that they really should have included at the original price point. I know they were trying to keep the price point down, but they've been going exponentially up every year. And now they have wireless charging and the phone is a lot more expensive. It's not a deal breaker for me, but it's something that I had wished they would have included. You know, it would have made it easier for me not to have to find a plug, you know, a USB-C to plug it into. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's not a deal breaker, but it would have been nice if they included it. And to be honest with you, the battery life has been pretty solid so far. I'm getting anywhere between 5 and 6 hours of screen on time, which is pretty good for an all screen display like this. It is a very large display. It's all screen. The battery life's solid. I wouldn't say it's great and I wouldn't say it's terrible. It's somewhere in the middle. It's solid battery life. Most people that use their phone an average amount of time every day, you know, the people that aren't heavy users are going to get through a full day, no problem. So the wire, and I'll tell you, it does charge really fast with the warp charging. So it's not a deal breaker by any means at all. It's just something that I personally thought was kind of an issue for me. The second thing I don't like about this phone, and it's not even anything that's happened to me yet, but I've heard and I've seen a lot of issues with OLED burn-in on this particular display. If you go on eBay, you can check it out. If you're looking for a OnePlus 7 Pro on eBay, you'll see a lot of them for sale around $200 that have OLED burn-in. Assuming because there's so many of those out there for sale that it's an issue I may have to deal with someday. And it's just something that you should think about if you're thinking about buying one of these, that could be an issue potentially in the future, even if the phone at the time that you purchase it doesn't have that issue. So just something to think about, just something to consider when you're considering buying this phone. And that's why I made it onto my list of the things I don't like about this phone, not because it happened to me, but because the possibility does exist that I could have OLED burn-in on this screen, which is going to, you know, kind of ruin the phone for me, especially on a white screen. So just something to think about if you're considering purchasing. The third thing I don't like about this phone, and it's I don't know if it's a pet peeve of mine or it's a pet peeve of some people, but the curved edges. I'm not a huge fan of curved edges in the first place, and these are weird. The edges on this phone, like on the Samsung, they kind of come down pretty quickly. These start very far in the phone, and it's a very gradual curve, which is great, but it's too long. I don't know if that makes any sense, but for me, it's just too long of a curve. It starts too far in to the display itself for me to be comfortable with it. Now, I will say the curved edge isn't nearly as bad. I keep it in this Rinky case. The curved edge is not nearly as bad when you have it in a case. I don't get any ghost touches or anything like that. I just wish they would have, you know, made it as gradual as it is, but started it a little further toward the edge of the screen. It's a small pet peeve, and I get that, but in everyday use, if you're using this phone without a case, it can get annoying, and the phone is extremely slippery in your hand when you have no case on it. And it's due mostly to that edge, because the back of the phone is actually fairly comfortable in that matte glass. It's actually a little bit grippy, but once you get around and you're holding it like this and you have your phone on the edges of that, it becomes very slippery. So, you know, small peeve, yeah, I get it, but I prefer, I mean, me in general, I prefer a flat screen to a curved screen. And I know, you know, it's 50-50 on that out there. Some people love the curved screens. I just wish this would have been a little bit shorter of a curve distance-wise. I think they started it a little too early on the edges here. So there's a lot more curve than there needs to be. But, you know, again, another pet peeve of mine and something that bothers me that might not bother you. You may love it. And honestly, with the case on it, it's really not as bad. And one more thing I wanted to add before I wrap this up, and something I didn't mention in any of my goods or bads or any of that stuff, is the speakers on this phone are awesome. I mean, they're dual speakers. They sound great. They get extremely loud. They don't distort too much. So if you're somebody who likes to consume content, it kind of goes along with the fact that I really love the immersive display, that not only do you have this immersive display, but you have some really good speakers to go along with it. So basically what I'm saying is that this is a content machine. If you like playing games and you like watching YouTube video and content and things like that, this is an excellent phone for someone who's going to constantly consume different kinds of content. It's set up for people who do that. it's a great phone for those things, especially not having a notch or not having any kind of hindrance to this screen. The whole experience becomes more immersive. All right, that about wraps it up for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, please hit that subscribe button. And as always, please leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think. I always want to know what you guys think, and it's fun to interact. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.